Welcome to UK Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hi everyone and welcome to the show. I'm Trevor Stockwell and I'm looking forward to chatting with today's guest, as always. But she's a successful businesswoman who has a passion for developing leaders. She's the owner of Synagap Solutions, a leadership consulting firm. She has 20 years experience in leadership and organizational development that she's gleaned through a professional and an academic career. She's also a podcast host and she's written the book, Choose to be a Leader Others Would Want to Follow. Welcome, Johanna Pagonis.
Thank you, Trevor.
Glad to have you on the show. Really looking forward to our conversation today. And I know that all that you're going to share today is really going to help the business owners listening, because we want to kind of delve into emotional intelligence within leadership, transformational leadership, and a few other things as we go. So maybe just to kick us off, for people that have not yet had the pleasure of meeting you, how would you describe yourself? Experience, background, any way you want to go.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So yes, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I'm like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I want to make sure that, I read that saying from Confucius, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. And that really stuck with me as a teenager. And I thought, whatever I choose to do for my life, my career, I wanted to fulfill some kind of a purpose. But it took a long time for me to figure out what that purpose was. And I actually ended up getting kicked out of university because I just wasn't committed. I was not engaged and was just kind of going through the motions of this is what you do in life. You graduate from high school, you go to university. And I was really lost for a long time. And then I did a little bit of soul searching to develop a bit more self-awareness. And then I thought I really wanted to help other people. I wanted to give them the skills that they needed to cope through life's challenges, to be, contributing members of their society, and to just be happy people, right? And to make other people feel good around them. And so I thought, well, that's psychology. And so I started to pursue a career in psychology to become a therapist. And I wanted to become a marriage family counselor initially because I loved systems. To me, the family is a system. And if you only work with one part of the system, that one part may never really transform. So I wanted to work with all of the elements or the components within the system, which is the entire family. So if there was one person struggling in the family, all could support and also learn to better themselves as well and become just have a bit more well-being in their own lives as well. And then I took a turn. I ended up, graduating my master's and worked for a significant amount of time with nonprofits, working with at-risk youth and children. And then I moved to a whole different province, it's a 4-hour flight from where I was living. And I found myself alone, living in a new city. And once again, nonprofits, a lot of it was contracts, a year-by-year contract basis. Although I loved what I did, there wasn't any stability in it. And it's a bit nerve-wracking when you're living hours away from anything that is a stable force in your life to not having that stability in terms of financially. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should get a job in a for-profit or government organization where maybe there's a bit more stability and consistency in terms of the work and the paycheck. And I ended up working for government. And somehow I took a turn and went into learning and development. And then slowly moved into organizational learning and development. So moving from an individual focus and trying to improve their performance to looking at the organization as a system and how to impact and influence the organization in a positive way. And so I realized through doing a few podcasts that my focus and my purpose hasn't changed. It's always been to help people, give them the skills that they need to cope through life's challenges. And I always wanted to focus on a system. So instead of working with families as a system, now I work with organizations as a system and work with the people within the organization to create processes that they can leverage to really empower their workforce to achieve organizational success. So that's a little bit of my career trajectory of how it's led me to where I am today.
That sounds fascinating, and I think it's a really good kind of process in the sense of you started with the family, the people element, and then translated it into the organizational. Because like if you get family health right, you've got a lot of good principles you can then do kind of in the organization. If you start from the bigger picture with lots of people, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but maybe I wouldn't imagine it works as well. So I think you've kind of progressed really well in that element. So how would you, just kind of off the top, how would you compare a family unit with an organization? So what would be the similarities that easily translated across?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I never actually I think unconsciously I have thought of it in that way. Hence making the comparison between families as systems and organizations, but never really looked at the elements and compared them. But if you think about it, I mean, within a family, there tends to be one or two people that are the head of the family. You know, if you're a single parent, there's one person. If there's two, there's the mother and the father, or if it's two mothers or two dads, right? There are at least one or two people that are the head of the family. So the analogy to that would be, you know, the CEO, the president, or the owner of a company, right? Who is responsible for the overall well-being of the success of that unit, of that team. And I want to personalize a little bit more. I don't want to call it a unit. Let's call it a team. The people within that organization, whether it's a family or a company, the head of that organization is responsible for their well-being and ensuring that they will be successful in whatever they've set out to accomplish. So in a family unit, you usually want the best for your kids. You're raising them and you're trying to give them the skills, the competencies, and above all, the confidence to be successful in their lives. And ideally, although, you know, depends what kind of parenting style you have, you don't want to be telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do it. You know, as a parent, you shouldn't be saying, okay, and we all do this as parents, you know, before they're born, oh, I want him to go into wrestling. I want her to be a lawyer. Like we've already set out kind of what their career and life trajectory should be. But ideally, what you do is you guide them. You don't hold them by the hand and tell them everything that they need to do and how to do it, because that doesn't give people the skills. It doesn't empower them to be able to problem solve and cope with challenges that inevitably will happen in life. And if you're the CEO of a company, it's no different, right? So you're responsible for the human beings in your company. You're responsible for their well-being, and your job is to empower them and give them the skills that they need to be successful on their own level, right? As an individual achieving their tasks and working within a team atmosphere and dynamic so that they can contribute to the overall success of the company. And as a parent, you have to do the same thing, especially if you have more than one kid. You can't just focus on one child. You have to think about all of the kids and ensure that you create an environment where they can coexist in a way that it's a supportive environment. So you're not pinning your kids against one another, comparing them and giving one rewards over the other. And, you know, as I'm saying this, these are the ideal ways that family units need to function, but companies too. So I think there's more similarities than differences. And one can say, yeah, but an organization typically, especially in the for-profit world, is focused on profits as their bottom line. And I challenge that. And I say to companies who will bring me on to help them, ultimately what I do is I help companies achieve their vision, their mission. And sometimes I ask them, what is your vision statement? Well, it's to make $2.5 million more this year than last. I'm like, no, that's what you do. Why do you do it? And they struggle to come up with that. And then when you give them the space to explore it, the things that they say are really inspiring and engaging and empowering. And I think as a family, and it's not focused on money, right? It really, when you get down to it, they're not focused on money. Sure, they like to make money, but they're not focused on that. And I think all good parents don't want, they would love their kids to be able to be financially secure and independent. But when you ask a parent, what is your goal, your aspiration for your child? Although initially they may say to become a lawyer or a doctor and make $500,000 a year. Yeah, maybe that's what the first thing that may come out of their mouths. When you really get down to it, that's not really what they want for their child, or their children. They want them to be happy. They want them to be to be able to persevere, to be resilient, and to be successful in a way that they define that for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way of comparing the two. I could dig into that in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. That was an awesome question.
No, it's good. As you were saying about it, I was kind of realizing, like, and for the listeners, like, whether they've got a handful of people on their team trying to build the company, whether they've got more than that, or maybe there's just one other person that kind of steps in and helps stuff, even in a part-time role. I think what I'm hearing is it's the valuing of the individuals around you contributes to the health of the unit, the team, the company. And then you're in a better place, a stronger place to build and kind of scale up your business. And I think it teaches you how to, if you relate well to your team, you're going to relate better to your customers as well. I don't think you can be an expert at building great relationships with your customers and your team's falling apart because they're dysfunctional, because they don't trust you, because you know you're not investing in them, whatever the reasons would be. Yes, but let me dig a little bit deeper into it, because I know you're a great believer in the importance of emotional intelligence within leadership, which all kind of feeds into how do we develop healthy staff members, teams around us. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, about emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. And it still surprises me. Once again, it's like my whole business philosophy, the focus of my academic research has been in emotional intelligence. And the funny thing is, it didn't start off that way. I mean, when you ask me what a good leader is, I couldn't even really differentiate between a manager and a leader. So when I embarked in my academic PhD studies, I had this mindset, which has been shattered through my academic research, of what really leadership is. And really, what is this thing called emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence wasn't even on my radar when after I graduated from my master's degree. I never even knew what emotional intelligence was. I hadn't even heard of it. So that was like over 10 years ago. I never even heard of the term. And then slowly but surely through my corporate work experience and then doing my PhD studies, this terms kept coming up. And really what I wanted to do was understand, because I saw a gap in the business world. We don't develop our leaders. And it's so funny. When I speak to some other podcast hosts and they say, yeah, that's usually in bigger companies. They ask me, bigger companies, they'll have a strong leadership development strategy, right? The smaller ones, medium, don't. I'm like, no, nobody has a leadership development strategy. I would say 75 to 80. I would even say 85%. Although I'm going to be honest, I haven't done the research. This percentage is a guesstimate, some based on research and some based on personal experience of companies I worked with. I would say 80% do not have a leadership development strategy. And just because you're a small company doesn't mean you're off the hook. And just because you're a large company doesn't mean you're off the hook. Like everybody should have one. And a lot of people don't. And so they expose their individual team members who get promoted into a managerial position to a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and they do set them up to fail. And companies aren't doing that intentionally. They need a beating heart, somebody who can show up to work every day, who seems to know what the hell it is that they're doing, who can just take on a leadership role so that the CEO or the president and the owner can be disburdened with a bit, but we don't really succeed when we do that. And so I wanted to discover, well, okay, this is the reality for many of us, because as a senior manager, I had experienced that over and over again as I moved up in my career. So this is madness. Let's figure out how do managers actually learn through everyday work so we can leverage these systems and processes, right? Going back to that systems thinking, and how do we recreate that throughout the organization so we can set people up to succeed when they become a leader? And I got challenged by my PhD supervisory committee around, well, what is leadership and how does it differ from management? You conflate the two terms. I'm like, they're the same. And they're like, no, they're not the same. We challenge you to go into the literature, which I did, but really this is how I really discovered what emotional intelligence is. So I do all of these interviews. I do all of these field observations. I went into the field. I followed managers around in a very high risk environment because some of the pushback I got was, I work in a high-paced, high-risk environment. I don't have time to be the leader that, you know, is emotionally intelligent. And so in some ways, although I wasn't thinking of emotional intelligence at the time, I wanted to work in one of the most craziest, dangerous environments to see how does leadership and management manifest itself, you know? And if they can do it in these high risk, super busy, volatile environments, then anybody can do it, you know, anybody can do it. So did field observations, and I started looking through all my data. And as you see me, maybe people can't see because it's audio only, but I'm looking at my whiteboard because that's where I captured a lot of my data. And I would write stuff there and on flip charts, and my whole wall, all my walls were plastered with it. And I would theme, I would code, I would categorize. And there was these 4 categories that emerged over and over and over again when the managers that I interviewed, from frontline supervisors to directors of huge divisions who I interviewed, the same thing kept coming up over and over again, and kept saying, you need to know what you don't know. You need to be self-aware. You know, you need to be humble and have the humility to say, I don't know everything. And you need to seek out others who do. And you need to be continually striving to develop yourself, which is really what the concept of a growth mindset is. Yeah. You have to know what your emotional triggers are. You're going to be challenged over and over again to control your emotions. You need to embrace your emotions and listen to them. They're important, but you can't let them completely control your life, or you're inconsistent in the way you approach and work with people, that you're flying off the handle because you're so angry you can't control your rage. You know, you have to be self-aware of what those triggers are so you can feel it coming on and you can control yourself. But we're human, we make mistakes, and you have to be able to admit fault to your followers. You have to be humble to say, I screwed up. That came out over and over again. But they said, you always have to have hope for the future too, which means you have to understand the vision and the purpose of your organization. What are they? Why do they exist? What is it they want to do? And ultimately, most companies want to help other people. They want to make people's lives better through the products and the services they offer. You have to understand how you fit into that vision and how you make how other people on your team contribute to the successful achievement of that vision. And the way you do that is you develop relationships with people. You actually get to know who they are, their names, who had a baby, congratulations. Maybe let's take everybody out to celebrate just because we can. You know, you have to recognize and reward, and not a superficial way, but in a way that builds bonds with people. You actually have to give a bleep about your people. You really do. And so these were the 4 categories, right? Self-awareness, self-management. The one around vision and understanding how you fit into it is called social awareness. And the last one is about relationship management, which means too, you can develop trusting relationships, but all trusting relationships are built on conflict. And we can get into that later too, but conflict isn't a 4-letter word. It's not a bad word. You know, it's necessary and critical for people to develop trust. It's one of those barriers, or I don't even want to call it a barrier, but it's the conflict tunnel you have to walk through to get to the other side, which is trust. And so they talked about that a lot. And those were, here I am looking at this. I'm like, these 4 categories kept popping out. And I'm listening to my supervisory committee, looking at the literature, Johanna. You need to understand the difference between leadership and management. And so I'm looking at, I had a book by Daniel Goleman, Boyatsis, and McKean. They wrote the book Primal Leadership and Resonant Leadership. And many of us know Daniel Goleman wrote the book on emotional intelligence, which came from other researchers who coined the term. And so I'm looking at all of this literature on leadership and emotional intelligence. And as I open the chapter on emotional intelligence in the book Resonant Leadership, out come these 4 categories. I'm like, I think I wrote this even in my book. A hand came out literally of the flip charts on the wall and slapped me across the face and said, that's emotional intelligence, bozo. That's what leadership is. Leadership is emotional intelligence. Yeah. And when I looked at all of the literature and all of the Kouzes and Posner, some of the greats that we know that have done so much work in research and leadership, Brene Brown on vulnerability, they all say the same thing, which I believe is grounded in the concept of emotional intelligence. And that's what I saw coming out. So when people say, what's leadership? I say it's the 4 domains of emotional intelligence. And you don't have to be a formal supervisor to have these competencies, these 4 competencies. You don't. If you want to become a formal leader, you better make sure that you have those 4 competencies before you even think about becoming a formal leader, somebody who's in a designated supervisory role. Otherwise, you won't succeed. You can't achieve success for the organization if you don't know how to empower and engage your people, because you shouldn't be doing all the work. Just like the analogy with the parenting. As a parent, are you going to go and write your kids' exams? Are you going to go and play soccer on the field for them? You know, and you know what? I think there are some parents that write the exams for their kids. Especially now that kids are being homeschooled, it's a lot easier. But you don't want to be doing that. And as a manager, you shouldn't be, to put it in a very simplistic way, making widgets for your staff. You have to empower them, give them the tools and the knowledge and the confidence to make the widgets or whatever it is they need to be producing. Because you, as the leader, have to ensure that you understand the vision and that you're providing that clarity and for your team, and you have to be removing blockades and obstacles for them so they can do their job. And it's, to me, it still surprises me how a lot of people still struggle with that, because companies are more focused on making a profit than they are in teaching their people emotional intelligence, right from the front line all the way up. And I think when we look at recruitment, we need to flip it on its head and say, don't only recruit, and dare I say, stop recruiting for technical expertise. Really, try something radical. Don't hire for technical expertise, but hire somebody who has the potential to develop emotional intelligence, because chances are you can teach them a lot of the technical expertise. I'm saying that and challenging that. Obviously, if you need a heart surgeon, you're not going to bring in somebody like me and say, oh, but you have this propensity to be emotionally intelligent. We'll teach you how to do open heart surgery. Obviously there's limitations to what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that to challenge people's mindset and to get them to think out of the box, right? Create some cognitive dissonance. So people are like, wait a second, what if I think differently about leadership? Now that I know it's grounded within the theory and the concept of emotional intelligence, how do I hire to that? How do I develop people to develop those competencies?
Yeah, that's fascinating. As you're telling me about that, I'm kind of realizing more. Just one of the things I think the struggle is, we forget that people are wired differently, and what works for us won't always work for other people, and we have to accommodate that. But I think it's also like whether our listeners are a sole trader, whether they've got multiple staff, it comes primarily down to how well am I leading myself, and then how I interact with other people, isn't it? Am I self-aware, as you say? Am I socially aware of how I'm coming across? Am I micromanaging, or am I actually empowering people, delegating and leaving it for them to, in a healthy way, make their own mistakes, as long as it doesn't, the consequences aren't too
Great.
spreading. But even, it's the challenge, I think, of can we let go enough to really trust other people? Or do I feel that I need to do it all myself because nobody else is going to do it as well? Or, what would I do if I'm not doing that? Do you know what I mean? There's the ego element as well wrapped up in, isn't it? I want to be seen to achieve. I'm going to get the workers to kind of help me do that, but I don't want them to overshadow me. And I think that's one of the dangers as well, isn't it? Is that what you're finding as well?
Yes, you nailed it. I think what you just said is so important, and people need to spend a little bit of time on that. Two things you said that, as we approach near the end of our conversation, for people to walk away, 2 questions to ask yourself, okay, number one is, if you really want to be an amazing leader, you have to develop self-awareness, which is and developing self-awareness can be painful because you have to admit a truth that you may have been trying to avoid, that you don't know how to do everything. And you have to figure out what can you do super well so you can leverage that, but also admit what you don't do super well. And as a leader, here's the thing that you just said, Trevor, that's so powerful. If I don't do all the work, what will I do? I actually had a manager say that to me. But Johanna, this is what I say. If you're doing your job really well as a leader, you realize it's easy and you're not doing the work anymore. And there's a part of you that feels guilty with that and feels like you'll lose credibility. Yeah. No, trust me. People will appreciate and respect you for that, because you can't empower people to do their job if you're doing their job for them. Your job, which does take a lot of time and effort, is to figure out what they need to do their job, and then to advocate for them in those management meetings where the decisions are made. And if they make decisions, and more often than not, they make decisions that do not empower your team. And you know why? I mean, as a manager and a senior manager and executive, I didn't wake up in the morning saying, let me see how I can disenfranchise the people in my organization by making a decision that pisses them off. That's not how I make my decisions.
Yeah.
I make my decisions based on the information I have. But if my leadership team who reports to me doesn't know their people, hasn't made the time to get to know what it is that they need, they can't advocate for them in the meetings. So I will make a decision that most likely will create more barriers for them in doing their job than actually more supports. Yeah. And so if you're not doing your job as a manager well, or as a formal leader, you'll find out because your team will be complaining all the time, or the company doesn't care about them and is trying to sabotage their efforts and doesn't appreciate their credibility. You hear stuff like that, you realize that's when you should say to yourself, I need to emerge out of my office and stop doing their job. So get over your ego. And I'm going to put it bluntly. If you feel like if I don't make the widgets anymore, I'll lose credibility, that's you. That is your ego. Yeah. And that's where you have to start to develop self-awareness. And why don't you actually sit down with your team and share some of these thoughts that you're having? Get feedback from them around, hey, what could I do differently to best support you? And they may not be willing to be totally truthful to you, especially if you created a lot of barriers and you're doing their job and you're dictating more than empowering. Yeah. But if you keep asking the question, which means you have to meet with them regularly and create a space to have those conversations, they will start to trust you and they will start telling you the truth. And that's how you develop more self-awareness, by getting feedback and admitting and saying, I guess I do have a bit of an ego. When you become a formal leader, let's be honest, we all have an ego, but we need our souls to speak a little bit more than just our egos. Our egos can get us in trouble if we don't double check it with what our inner being is telling us, which is proper and right. And then I talk about these concepts in the book because some of the quotes that these participants gave me, and I think one of the last quotes I give in the book is, you choose to be the leader that you want to be, but you can't really lead and inspire people if you're locked in your office and you don't go out to get to know your people. So put your ego aside and know that your job isn't to do their job. It's to empower them to do theirs. Hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I was going to also quiz you about how can leaders become self-aware, but you've also wrapped that up well in your response to that. So yeah, thank you for that. I think it's also like there's benefits, like you say, of opening up to people. I always remember something John Maxwell said, which kind of stuck with me about he told a CEO or someone to go back to his team and admit the things he does wrong. And the guy said, no, I can't do that. And he said, it's not that your team don't know you do those things wrong. It's that they need to know that you're aware that you're doing it wrong and you want to change it. And it's the same, whatever size the business is, isn't it? It's the same, having that awareness where you kind of allow yourself to be human as well with the team. And I think that creates a lot more connection with the people that are around you, helping you progress whatever vision, whatever plan that you're trying to roll out. You need that buy-in, you need that connection from the people around you. They're there for a reason, not just to get a paycheck. Right. If you build the connection well, if you don't, it's then just, I just clock in, clock out. I don't have any more options. But a subject close to my heart, definitely. But tell us a bit more about the book. I'm keen to learn more about what you put.
So the book was written for, I guess, I initially thought I was writing it for organizational leaders so they can wake up to the fact that they are responsible for leadership development within their companies. And I wanted to give them tangible strategies to create a system of leadership throughout their companies. So how do you develop leadership quality? So what are the key behavioral indicators of strong leadership? Like, what are the behaviors that leaders need to role model and demonstrate to be successful leaders? And then how do you reward and recognize people for that? And then how do you create a system across your organization that all leaders live up to those behaviors and values, really? And so I wanted to write the book for them. But as I wrote the book, and the book is really grounded within my PhD research, my dissertation. So as I was writing the book, I realized that I had another target audience that the book was for. It was for emerging or existing managers, leaders, somebody who's thinking about becoming a formal leader, and somebody who may typically is already in that position, who may be struggling and wanting a little bit more support in how to lead better. That's why it's called choose to be a leader others would want to follow. You have to choose to be that individual, and then you have to figure out what those behaviors are, and you need to practice them every day. And so really the book, at the heart of the book, it's called How to Lead with Heart and Purpose. So at the heart of the book are strategies that it's about what is leadership, what is emotional intelligence, how do you balance your leadership responsibilities with your management responsibilities. So we talk a little bit around what do you need to do to be a successful manager, because you do have to achieve organizational goals and results. You have to manage systems and processes, budget your forecasts. So I talk a little bit about that, although it's not an accounting book. But I talk a little bit about, why managing resources is important. And then I give strategies around how to do that. And because self-awareness is so critical, there are two ways that people learn: through self-awareness, reflecting on what you do well, what you don't, and how to improve that. And we learn with and through others. That's why the more emotionally intelligent you are, the better you learn. It's hard to learn when nobody trusts you or wants to advocate for you or support you. You'll be isolated. And we don't learn in isolation. We learn with others. So at the end of, I think it's actually every chapter, there are self-reflective questions and a space for you to write your answers. And you can do it in your mind, or you can actually write it in the book, but it's to challenge you and get you to think a little bit more. And I talk a little bit of why leadership training fails. My business focuses a lot on training. I do it in a very different way that leverages good old adult learning principles and how to make sure that what you're learning sticks. So I talk about that in the book. And then the last chapter is devoted to women and leadership and the challenges that we as women face, especially when we work in male-dominated industries, in terms of our own confidence, the development of our own grit and self-empowerment, and to be proud of ourselves and believe in our own convictions that we can make a space for ourselves, especially in a male-dominated industry, to know that the way I lead is unique to me, and I need to embrace that and not lead according to my male counterparts. So I talk about that in the book, and I end there is because I'm developing a robust program for women, emerging women leaders, women early in their career wanting to move into a leadership position. So I kind of introduced them to that program through the last chapter of that book. Yeah.
Sounds good. So everyone listening, I think you should definitely get a copy of that book. I think there's lots of different areas that we can all benefit from. You also do, I had a look at your site as well. You do some courses as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So I have online self-paced courses that are really, the target audience is emerging leaders. So as I mentioned, somebody who's thinking about becoming a leader, although the more and more leaders, formal leaders who I meet who have been a formal leader for a couple of years, the courses are targeted to them too. So the first course is actually, I'm designing a new one, which is an introductory course on emotional intelligence. And there's an emerging leader assessment that you do, and you get your survey results. And it just assesses whether you really are ready to take on a formal leadership position. And the questions are grounded in the concepts of emotional intelligence. The next level after that is developing the emotionally intelligent leader. And the whole course is an exercise in developing self-awareness. So there's a 360 in there. There's activities to get you to define what your purpose and mission is. Funny thing is, I actually had somebody say, I don't want to do the 360. I think it's BS. I'm like, it goes to show you, people don't want to develop self-awareness. People don't want feedback. So we talk about how to get feedback, how to receive feedback, how to embrace it and not be terrified of it. And then I have another course that's all about resiliency and agility, because if you can't manage your emotions and you're not self-aware of what your triggers are, you will never be a leader that others want to follow. And then I have a course for managers who want to empower and engage their teams, but aren't sure how to do that. So once again, embracing the concept of emotional intelligence and embedding a 360 within the course. There's an actual online course, which is a blended approach. Team members have to do certain activities individually. And then the second part is facilitated by either the manager or somebody who the manager chooses to facilitate. It could be someone from my company. It could be somebody internal to the organization. They come in, they facilitate the second part. And the whole part is called developing cohesive teams. So it looks at the concepts of inclusion, diversity, and how to leverage those and build those within your team so you have a strong, cohesive team. So that one is a bit of a different approach, because a lot of courses on diverse teams and cohesive teams is I'm going to sit down and click through a slide deck, which is an online course, and then magically somehow be able to apply what I've learned. My courses are all grounded in developing self-awareness. So there's a lot of activities. It's if you're looking for a quick and dirty course that you can get a certificate and show you're compliant, these aren't the courses for you. If you want to be challenged and dig deep on who you are and where you can grow, which is, I'm going to be honest, will be a little uncomfortable. But if you're brave enough to go there, then check out my courses, because that's what they get you to do.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, that's where we grow, isn't it? When we move out of our comfort zone, or we surround ourselves with people that help draw us out of our comfort zone, and kind of address the things that we can so easily just avoid. I think you should definitely come back and do another chat with us at some point. We've kind of run out of time today, but there's lots more things we could explore. And I think we should. That. How would people? What's the best way for them to find you? It's direct to your website. We'll put the link below.
A great question. Thank you. My book is on Amazon, so if they want to purchase it, they can go there. My website, sinogapsolutions.com. So if you provide a link, they can get there. And then there's a contact us page, obviously. And I'm on LinkedIn. Just, search my name, Johanna Pagonis, and you can send me a message or request to connect with me. I would love that. And also, if you want to stay up to date with the courses and the programs and my blogs and things like that I do, if you go onto my website and you scroll down, you can actually subscribe to my newsletter. So if you want to stay up to date, because I'm, like, as you mentioned, I also have a podcast. So I offer a lot of resources for free. If you're not ready yet to invest and purchase a course or bring me onto your company to do some work, access all the free resources I have to offer. So make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. That's one way.
Okay. That sounds very generous. Well done. Yeah. Adding value in lots of different ways. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for what you shared with us today. I've taken away a lot of things from it as well. I'm sure everyone listening has. So yeah, appreciate that. And I do look forward to you coming back at some point in the future. That would be amazing as well.
I love this conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciated it.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. And for everybody listening, yes, definitely take action. Grab hold of a couple of the things to start with, and then listen to the podcast again and get some more. But try and put something into practice within 24 hours. Tell somebody else some of the things you've learned. All of these things help consolidate what we're learning in the areas that we want to grow. So yes, definitely do that. I would encourage you to do that. One last thing before we sign off on the episode, I just want to remind everybody that Yoko's launched the Lifestyle Mastermind group, which is now available for registrations. He's offering a discount as well. So if you follow the link below and you put in the promo code, you can save a massive discount. Very briefly, it covers 4 areas. So income strategies, health practices, how to get ultimate happiness lifestyle, and also healthy relationships. So we'll kind of touch a bit on what we've spoken today, but dig into it in a different way as well. So be sure definitely to check out Joanna's website, the blog, sign up to the course, get the book as well. Go shopping, splash out, it will be good. And yes, we will catch you again on another episode. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Yukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.